Hello again, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Fun and Games Podcast. I'm Jeff Moonen.
And I'm Matt A.K. Stormageddon.
And you're listening to episode 127. And this episode, we are joined by Michael Hammond of Big Blue Bubble Games to talk about their upcoming heavy metal deck builder extraordinaire Power Chord. Mr. Hammond, thank you so much for being on the show today.
Happy to be here. Thanks for inviting me on.
I'm so excited to have you here, Michael. We first connected back in 2020. You were promoting Forgone, which then eventually we ended up having one of the developers on as a guest on the show, which was great. And got to promote that game. I loved that. Was such a great game. And then we got to reconnect very recently at PAX East 2022 over Power Chord, a game you're here promoting now. Before we get into Power Chord, why don't you tell the folks, the listeners, a little bit about what you do for Big Blue Bubble Games?
Yes. So I'm on the marketing side of games, but the thing I always say, with it being an indie kind of studio, it's one of those things where you have sort of one job that you're assigned, but you wear like 10 different hats and you get involved in kind of all aspects of development, which is definitely nice. And it's definitely why I like being in that indie kind of atmosphere.
Power Chord is one of those games that is dangerous. And why I say that is because as only a recent convert to deck building kind of like climb the tower, beat the baddies kind of game, I like Slay the Spire. I only played for the first time last year, which is of course clearly an influence in the style of this game.
A great one.
But what I love about Power Chord, and you know this about me, Michael, is I'm a giant music nerd. And because this is rock and roll based and music based, it just adds another element to it, because now you can't just have a good soundtrack. You got to have a great soundtrack. So I guess to start, talk a little bit about that idea of like making the mythos around demons and heavy metal. And like, was that always core to this game, and great music always core to this game, even from the get-go?
Yeah, definitely can thank our art director for it's really been his vision for a lot of the aesthetics and kind of the feeling that you get with the game of the, that punk rock, metal, demonic kind of attitude. And then it's also been, our awesome sound team. The soundtrack's all produced in-house by our two wonderful sound boys, Tom and Dylan. And they've done an awesome job creating the soundtrack. Especially, I feel like some of my favorite tracks people haven't even heard yet, because they're some of the later stages and boss battles and stuff like that. So I'm really excited for when people are going to get to check those ones out for sure. But yeah, from the beginning of sort of the inception of Power Chord, a big thing was trying to capture this heavy metal demonic kind of feeling with it. And it's definitely like it gives a different spin on, I think, the deck building genre, right? It brings people into that world who might not be interested in it before, but they're interested in the musical trappings and stuff like that.
Yeah, it's definitely got a bit of crossover appeal to it. In my time with it, I felt like if I had to like quick pitch it, because you always got to pitch games like it's like this meets this. It's like it's Slay the Spire meets Brutal Legend meets Metalocalypse.
Yeah.
With that idea of like, because it never quite goes into full-on Metalocalypse levels of absurdity, at least not what I played, but it always feels like it's teetering on the edge. And I think some of that is, that's a bit Brutal Legend as well. Just that idea of the sheer muchness of heavy metal and the more mythic ideas of your power metals and everything like that. Was there a balancing act in terms of whether or not it became parody or it became serious, or whether that was a line that was worried about being towed at all?
Yeah, I think if there was a line that we wanted to, a big focus for what we wanted to avoid, I'll start there is, and it's difficult because, definitely have encountered some people who, they immediately see the musical trappings and they immediately go to like, oh, it's a rhythm game of some type, right? Because, music, rhythm and everything. And so our biggest thing was we wanted to avoid the mindset of Guitar Hero and stuff like that. And so we wanted to try and get away from the, I'll say like campy nature of Guitar Hero.
Yeah.
And we wanted to still have fun with it and everything. But that was definitely kind of a line that we were trying to toe and kind of balance between It's goofy fun, but in not like a super campy way, I'd say.
It's when does excessive become too much?
Yeah, exactly.
What I love about this game also is that like we clearly all of us here fans of Slay the Spire and those deck builders. But what I like about Power Chord is from the get-go, it's not only different, but also promoting its differences. Like, I love that in the demo, you slowly build the band, right? You get to play essentially the first stage, the intro, and as of what I assume it to be, since I don't know the final version, but and you get to slowly build the band, and you meet one band member first, and then the next, and then the next. So you learn their different mechanics, and then you also find out that you can unlock other band members, and there are other band members that have different roles. But also the buff cards, which I think is where I want to start, is the mechanic is, when you're playing Slay the Spire, for example, you have one character, so everything affects that character or the enemies. But because you're managing a team here, you have cards that specifically enhance specific characters. Was that those kinds of mechanics were always, I imagine, a goal from the get-go? Since you're managing a team, you wanted to give more micromanagement to the kind of manipulation to the battles.
Yeah, so you're talking about previously short form pitching the game to people, and I always kind of take it as it's Slay the Spire meets Darkest Dungeon meets Brutal Legend, and the idea of that team management thing, and each member of the team having a specific role to play, but there being some interactivity between said characters. And so that was a huge thing with us, is we wanted there to definitely be a focus on sort of interactive and combos between your different band members, and we wanted to have that with everyone. We didn't want it just to be that Shinobi and Grimnir go together, or Stitch and Boar go together, or anything like that. We really wanted to make it so that any band member, no matter who they were, you could have some sort of interactivity between them, and you could really shape your deck in different ways. So one of the other things that was kind of a big focus for us was to also make different drummers or different bassists feel completely different from one another. So it wasn't just each drummer behaves the same. Part of that is each musician has their own sort of unique features and abilities that you were kind of saying there, Matt, that only they interact with. And so that definitely changes up the play style with them. For instance, in the most recent demo that's out on Steam as part of the Next Fest right now, we introduced a new vocalist, Ash or Odd. And so if you've played with the original one that's unlocked at the beginning, that's Stitch, she's much more of a healer and buffing, whereas this new vocalist, as the vocalist kind of are supports within your traditional structure, he is all about sort of your deck manipulation and letting you get to the specific cards you want so that you can set up the combos that you've been building in your deck. So it's a much different support role within that vocalist thing. And we kind of designed each musician to almost have 3 different ways that you could build them towards. So I like to say with Boar, the original drummer, it's you can build towards his special abilities, which are barriers, where you start manipulating them in fun ways. You can build him to be more traditional tank in dealing out lots of armor and guarding your other bandmates, or you can decide that you're just going to make him hit a truck and make him a really offensive character. And we took that approach kind of with each and every musician.
Yeah, and it's very funny because Boar looks like he could hit like a truck, but he's just big armored guy who's just doing 1 damage at a time until you build him up. It's very funny, the dichotomy of design. Yeah,
I feel like he is. People always. I think when you first walk away from the demo, I think your initial thing is, Grimnir, the guitarist, he's the strongest. And then if you play it a bit more, you realize, wow, Shinobi, the bassist, has some crazy interactivity that you can do. But then the true people, when they really mess around with it, and if you do a Boar build, Boar can do some of the craziest stuff and multi-team damage. And I love building towards them because I think it's one of the more fun and can be a bit challenging to kind of master.
I'll have to give that a try. I mean, you can pry poison damage from my cold, toxic hands, but you work with the cards that you get. That's the fun part of it.
Exactly.
See, my favorite thing to do in the demo is because I'm still learning these kinds of games. I'm not particularly good at roguelikes, and so I'm learning to make my way through it. But what I loved about the guitarist is that like as he takes damage, he does more damage.
Yes.
And because I'm not always super good at blocking damage, and you don't really want to be with him, it would get to the point where like the harder battles later in the demo, I would be able to like one-shot the tank because I'd be able to do 40 damage at once. And that is never not satisfying, to just take out the highest health character in one hit because you happen to build up all of this energy from taking damage.
Yeah, and I think that's why so many people originally come off with like, oh, Grimnir's the best, is because he's definitely the easiest for you to do exactly what you're saying of like, wow, I just did a 20 hit attack and wipe this one guy off the map.
He does numbers the easiest.
Yes, exactly, right? It's like especially if it's your first time and you're learning things, it's like you're going to get more damage against you and then he'll hit harder, right? So
and there's something fun in that sort of unfurling of a strategy. It's one of the things that I love about deck builder games. Yeah. I got into deck builders ages ago just because it was a way to save money on Magic the Gathering and space. And there is a great deal of fun in that, like, oh, this is the clear strategy, and you work with it, but then something else creeps in, sneaks in. And that happens with stuff like Slay the Spire, too, which we'll just use as kind of like the example point. I know there's plenty of others, but don't want to introduce too many right now. But that you have to balance on one character. How tricky has balance and synergy been in developing for not just 4 roles, but like multiple characters within each of those roles, and each of those, like you said, there's 3 general like build directions for each of those. That's a complex tree.
Yeah, it's a lot of permutations, right? And I'd say it's definitely difficult, but that's kind of where a lot of our focus has been.
Understandable.
Especially over the last, like I want to say like year, has been on really making everything feel good. And the nice thing is we've had the game at like a really playable state for like a long time, which has allowed us so much of that, really trying to balance the characters. And it's funny, like it doesn't even feel like it was that long ago, honestly. I remember the very first version that I played was literally a paper version that I got brought into a little side room at the office, and they basically kind of ran through the rules, and it's like, okay, and they had like little tokens to denote all the different things. And that allowed, especially I think, a lot of the early playtesting with characters before we even had things in place, programming and art wise, we were able to start testing right from the get-go there.
Around how long was that sort of playtesting phase before it really got into the digital realm?
I want to say that was probably... At this point, it was probably winter 2020, I think, if I'm remembering my dates. It's one of those things, like the pandemic has been a strange time, where everything's kind of foggy. But if I'm remembering correctly, I remember doing it at the office, and I think we had returned back to the office at one point in the winter of 2020. So that would kind of line up in my mind.
And so the game has been in development for about 2 years, give or take.
Yeah, about 2 years. Yeah.
I'm curious, have you guys gone on record and said how many characters are in this game? And if not, how many characters are you willing to say there are at least? Like, there are this many so far and there could be more, that kind of thing. Like, I'm curious because as we talk about these permutations, I'm starting to think of the different variety of just in style and look, not even like mechanics.
Yeah, so ones that have been officially unveiled and people have been able to try, I think we're at Asher Odd makes us 7 because we have the original 4. And we've done, usually when we do a new demo, we'll swap out one of the musicians so you can try out somebody new. And so we've also revealed Ember and Roxy Cleaver, so the drummer, the guitarist, and the vocalist. The only other one that we haven't revealed anything about is the bassist. But that being said, you can see her in one of the cutscenes of the demo. And I believe her name is Tora Volt, which Volt, she uses lightning kind of powers. So I don't think I've said anything about that. So there's your little, exclusive, if you will.
I feel so special.
So the plan is when we launch, we want to have 8 musicians. And the plan is is, you'll start the game with the 4 that you start in the demo, and there's different sort of challenges and stuff that you need to complete that will then unlock the additional 4 musicians. And then we do also plan to do post-release support with at least an additional 4 musicians, which we have those kind of designed out as in terms of how those are going to play, and we're in the process of actually building them so that we will be able to bring them once the game launches. So that'll mean there will be at minimum 12 different musicians that you'll be able to mix and match, right? And as I've said to like many people, it is definitely one of those things you'd be surprised how dramatically different a deck will play by just swapping out one character. Like, especially like I was saying, the Asher for Stitch, right? That those 2 decks play completely different.
Now, do any of these musicians have a keytar?
Have a keytar? You know what? I won't. Don't hold me to this, but I honestly think that the last guitarist may have a keytar. Now that you say it, I'll have to go. You have me interested that I'm gonna have to go check on Monday. They all look like.
I was going to be so facetious and be like, so when's the 5th slot for the keyboard? It's like, no, that's stupid. But wait, keytar. If you're going to add more people, that's a whole nother style.
No, exactly.
Incredible.
The other characters, they definitely all. That's the nice thing that I like about all of the musicians is every time I get shown like, oh, this is one of the new guys or girls or whatever. It's just like, I love how distinct they all look and how distinct they all feel when you're playing with them. I think the team's done like an amazing job kind of bringing those characters to life, and there's not a huge backstory necessarily behind them, but Grimnir, like we've talked about, I love just saying it's like, his whole thing is he's an angry bartender, and when he gets hit, he builds up rage and he unleashes that on other people, right? And it's like, it's very little, but I feel like that, you kind of know so much about that character just from that little snippet there, right?
Yeah, it's built on the archetypes, and because you can have several musicians, you can kind of go down different avenues. Now, there's already a clear wonderful cocktail or mishmash of influences going on in all the different designs, whether, Boar's more like the Thunder Fist, which incidentally is just such a badass name for anything. Like old school armor, and Stitch's more like tank girl aesthetics, and Grimnir's my inevitable cosplay and everything else. Is there a particular thought process of archetypes to pull from? Are there any sort of musician in jokes, which I've gone on record several times saying it is the best flex ever to make the singer the support class.
Yes. Yeah.
I love that so much.
It's funny how many people who are musicians and stuff, you can tell who is a lead singer and who is, something else in the band from how they react to the singer being a support and not, the main
damage dealer,
exactly,
whatever it is.
But yeah, in terms of influence, one of the big things that Jamie, our art director, and I also basically refer to him as like the game director on Power Chord, is he didn't want, because like you can definitely, take Power Chord in a way where each musician is like, oh, this is a riff off of XYZ, and this is a riff off of,
and anyone can stretch that.
And that was a big thing that he wanted to avoid, is being like, oh, this guy's Slash and this guy's Mick Jagger and stuff like that, right? And so it was really wanting to create our own characters and then looking for little inspirations maybe in one's own life. For instance, the drummer Roxy Cleaver, who's the second drummer, a lot of the inspiration for that is kind of around like a roller derby person, specifically because somebody in the office, she used to do roller derby and her name was Roxy. And so like, that's where a lot of the inspiration for that character came from. And so I think that's what kind of makes them feel unique and not a rehash of, characters you've seen in other games and media.
Absolutely. And I mean, there's plenty of not just like rhythm or music games, but like music inspired games that have those sort of ink suit inserts of folks. But this is one where you're building a deck and you're making it your own. So I think that level of insertion that can happen in that personal touch, I think that is definitely the right way to go. And I'm already loving it. I look forward to seeing more characters.
Awesome.
Yeah, I love the art direction. It's cartoony, but not, it's got the cell shade. It feels comic booky almost a
comic book,
little bit. Like, it definitely feels like a mashup of a bunch of different styles. And I really enjoy that because that makes it feels wholly unique. Like, I don't look at this game and go, oh, these characters look like they're from this thing, right? Like, they very much feel wholly unique. I'm curious. So the game's been developed for about 2 years. It's got a demo right now on Steam Next Fest, and people can go play that demo right now. But I'm curious if y'all you're talking about stuff you want to do post-launch. Obviously, you haven't announced a release date yet, but I assume that you guys are on a track. Are you at least on track to hit what your perceived goal is, your perceived release window is, or is it kind of still a moving target as you finalize some
stuff? we were definitely initially eyeing for the end of summer here, but as things get a bit closer to the end, we want to make sure that when the game releases, it's that first version that people play is going to feel polished, and that all the characters feel good, and that there is that balance and everything. So yes, we were trying for the end of the summer there, but it may end up pushing a bit past that as these things go.
I mean, but that makes sense, right? You want it to feel right. You don't want to launch a thing that's not ready to go. Yes. And the demo feels tight as hell. Like, at least to my novice eye, didn't notice any issues or problems. I assumed if I died or did something wrong, it was my own fault, because it probably was. But it's nice to hear that y'all have kind of an idea of what you're looking for, and you're aiming towards something. I'm curious now, with your background, we've had the pleasure of talking about Foregone on this show, which I know you guys also made, and a bunch of other things. What's your style of game? What are your favorite genres? Do you fit into the games you've made, like the side-scrolling platformers and the deck builders, or are these things you learned to love through working on them, and that your favorite genres are other things?
The beautiful thing about the games that I love, I definitely describe myself as a variety gamer. And so for me personally, something like Xbox Game Pass is like the greatest thing to ever happen. And so I love that. And yeah, I am definitely someone who I'm down to try just about anything. I definitely, with Power Chord, I will say I was a huge Darkest Dungeon fan. Like, I have probably played that game for over 200 hours, and I've bought it on Steam, I bought it on Switch, I bought it on PlayStation. Same with Slay the Spire. I was an absolute Slay the Spire fiend and played that on Steam, and then got it on Switch. And so with Power Chord, for sure, I was super excited when we started working on the project, because it definitely, of the favorite genres or type of games that I have, it definitely fit within that. But yeah, in terms of other games, Foregone was, I love a good Metroidvania or a roguelike or anything like that. And I loved Dead Cells at the time. And so, yeah, it's definitely one of those things where I think that helps me in my role, where I need to be able to figure out what people like about certain games and why our game might appeal to them. For instance, one thing that is very different from Foregone and very different from Power Chord is probably our most popular game, My Singing Monsters, which the vast majority of people that I talk to and see at game conventions have probably never heard of. But it's a game that has been played by like hundreds of millions of people, and that's still a game that we're working on. And so it's nice sometimes to, have the hardcore vertical with Power Chord that we're working on and thinking about, but then also having this, more casual and something that flexes different muscles on my side.
Yeah, it sounds like you really are someone who kind of just likes what you like. It's not like
I just love games.
Oh yeah,
right. Yeah, which is great. And I've become more that person. I used to write off certain genres when I was younger, just because I wasn't good at them or whatever else. And I've kind of expanded as I've gotten older. I'm curious, like, what your early gaming life was. Do you remember, like, your first console, the first game you really loved playing? Like,
oh yeah, I remember all that stuff. So my first console that I had was the Sega Master System.
Damn.
And the first game that I remember absolutely loving was the original Wonder Boy, which is so funny. All the Wonder Boys that come out now, even the re-releases that they've done, they're all way different from what the original
this was
Wonder
the Adventure
Boy
Island
was.
offshoot, or what Adventure Island was an offshoot of.
Yes, exactly, right. And so that was like my first love. But then from there, I think I became a bit of a PC and a Nintendo guy. With PC, it was like, a lot of the strategy and tycoon kind of games. And then I think where like the full on, like I was obsessed with games was getting the original Xbox, and that really became where I was a full on gamer and playing things like, I know you, Matt, are experiencing one of my favorite games right now with Knights of the Old Republic. Which when I saw your tweet earlier about hitting a certain point in the game, I was like, oh yeah, I can't wait till they remake this game so I can relive all this. But
it's funny that you bring up Knights of the Old Republic. It's a game that I tried to, like, I say I've never played it, and that's sort of a lie, because I've tried to play it a couple times on Steam. The controls just aren't great.
It's an old game, right?
Like, it's an old
and
game.
There's a difference between having experienced the game and played the game.
Yeah, and like also with that game specifically, BioWare isn't known for their PC ports having good controller support. They've always been a keyboard and mouse company. Now with the Legendary Edition and some other re-releases, they've leaned back towards that. But Aspyr did such a great job of porting these to the Switch, and I have a friend of this show, Scott White, who did a review of them for RPG Site, and he's like, Matt, I know that you're frustrated with the PC version. Buy the Switch versions. The ports are great. You're going to fall in love with them. And I absolutely did. And the thing that Michael is referring to is that the other night I got to the major spoiler of Knights of the Old Republic, which I still won't ruin because people are playing it for the first time.
You experienced it, right? Like, because nobody talked about it.
That's cool.
Yeah. And I went, I'm who? And literally the Aspyr social media account, God bless them, responded with like the Jennifer Lawrence, like, yikes gif to my reaction. It was just so perfect. And like, those are the moments playing games that I really love. And like, it's funny, like I share my stuff on Twitter just because I like to share the journey with folks, and a little bit of an attention whore, I know that. But like, it's also for those moments, because then this morning I woke up to tons of tweets of folks being like, you didn't have that ruined? Yeah. You didn't know? This is such an old game. And it's why I still won't talk about major spoilers in Final Fantasy VII or in Mass Effect. I try and avoid them or give warning, because if you can preserve that moment for someone, like, I'm so glad I didn't know that, because I lost my mind last night. Like, I'm just casually playing the game, and then, Bastila drops this bomb on me, and I'm like, damn you, Jennifer Hale. You're amazing. How could you do this to me? So yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. And like, I think that those kinds of moments in gaming can be so rare now, and I'd love to get to still experience them.
Yeah, it is very fun to get to have those like weird discovery moments. This is a little off kilter, but this just happened, Matt. I don't think I told you this happened. The current retro game that I'm playing with my spouse is Majora's Mask.
Ooh,
which
good one.
Sarah is a huge Zelda fan. Like, she's played through all of the recent ones. She never played the N64 ones, despite being such a big N64 fan. She was playing the 3D platformers. So we are going through Majora's Mask, and I think she heard enough bad things or whatever things about it. She's like, I don't know, maybe all right, let's check it out. She did not realize there was time travel in this game. Like, that's not like, oh, what an idiot or anything. It's just like, no, what a pure, unsullied experience.
Yes,
and if it's spoiled, it's spoiled, whatever. But she's like, it's getting close. There's less than 24 hours left. How long is this game? And I'm just like, what are you trying to get? My ocarina? Which ocarina is that? The Ocarina of Time. Got it. Oh, I thought she was doing a bit. And there was just such genuine joy in that unlocking and that finding, that I think that it's very cool that even with older games like Knights of the Old Republic, there's still times to have those discoveries and to get to share them now with like all sorts of people.
Well, yeah, and it was nice that you had that experience, because then it re-triggers, my memory of like, oh yeah, that was like such a good moment, right?
And it's so dramatic how they do it.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Yeah. And like, so actually to bring this back around to Power Chord and to you, Michael, like, have people already had those moments with Power Chord, like discovery, or like really like awesome, like, I can't believe I pulled that off, or check out this move? Like, I'm sure folks have been, the folks who can talk about it, and as we slowly promote it, as we move on to the release, like, have you seen anything online or on Twitch or whatever that you're like, oh, I can't believe they experienced that, or that's really cool kind of things?
Yeah, there's definitely I think the point for that is when, you're able to line up the perfect combo or something. Like, I remember at PAX East when we were there was somebody who had built this like awesome deck, and we got to like one of the elite battles or something like that, and just the way that their first hand was dealt, they had like a god tier hand, and they were able to wipe 3 of the 4 guys in the first turn, and it was like, and they were psyched, and I was psyched because I was like, wow, like I mean, like I've seen being able to do that, but like you have to get up to it and kind of power up your guys throughout the turn to really pull that off. And so I think those are the moments when you're able to sort of like break the game in that. I think that's one of the things I personally love about deck builders, especially, and Slay the Spire for sure, is like when you have that run where, you know, the gear items that you've got or the cards that you've picked up have essentially made you able to break the game and make you feel like you're the smartest person in the world and you've built like an unstoppable machine and everything. And so that was like a big thing with us when we were designing a lot of the cards and the characters, is keeping things in mind of, you know, it's okay to have those moments where it feels like quote unquote broken if you line up X, Y, and Z to unleash like the ultimate attack or something like that.
Because all the circumstances have to line up. You can't force that.
Yes, exactly. Exactly.
I mean, that was my like Elden Ring is a game that I've talked about a lot, and it's like I'm only a recent Souls fan, but my favorite thing about Elden Ring now is like I have a friend, my friend Glenn, who literally just goes into that game to break it. Like he plays it over and over again. He loves playing it and loves that game, but like was doing like a double katana build that literally eviscerated all enemies. And like I'll never understand how a fandom can be like, no, you're breaking the game. That's not how you're meant to play it. It's like, if the developers give me the resources to do the thing, I'm gonna do the thing. Like in the Mass Effect franchise, like there are certain like reaction triggers that like if certain people don't take them, they're a cop. Like I don't trust them. Like there's some things that are universal, and I think breaking video games and like it was always martyred as cheating and like you're wrong. And we've talked about this before on the show. And I think it's quite the opposite. If you can bend a game to your will, you're not cheating. You're making the game better because you're just like...
It's your experience and your fun, especially in a single-player experience. Who are you cheating?
Yeah. I think you said the key word there is it's your fun. And it's like, at the end of the day, it's a game. And to me, it's like games are to have fun and they're to be an escape and everything. And so, yeah, like if your fun is, you know, completely breaking the game and sometimes breaking it in ways that weren't intended and stuff like that, like if that's giving you a sense of fun and you're enjoying the game, then it's like power to you. I'm happy that we're able to create something that you're able to have that fun with, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, for sure. So I'm curious with Power Chord, obviously the heavy metal influence, the music is really very much like heavy metal bands of yore. Is there, you know, you talked about releasing characters in the future. What about battle tracks and like soundtracks and the music for the game? Is there a plan for any kind of vinyl release or like soundtrack release? Because, you know, Foregone soundtrack, is incredible. It's gorgeous. But, you know, when I play a game like that, I don't necessarily think about listening to it later. But with something like Power Chord, which is obviously so heavily influenced by the music that it's representing, is there plans for that kind of thing, like to release an extended soundtrack or vinyl or anything like that?
100% definitely going to be releasing a soundtrack for the game. Most likely we'll do what we typically do. We'll release the soundtrack on Spotify and Apple Music and stuff like that. But then we'll also, we typically also make the soundtrack available on Steam and bundle that in a package if somebody's interested in that and, you know, owning the tracks themselves. And then in terms of like vinyls or something like that, I think that's a fun potential there.
Right.
I think especially if we were to do something like a physical release of the game or something, and you know, when you see things with limited run where it's, you know, oh, this whole package where it has, you know, the cassette tape or vinyl or something like that, I definitely think that if we were to go down that route, it would probably be somewhat like that.
Yeah, I mean, that makes sense.
Yeah, there's a lot of good platforms for that, whether for the physical release of the game or video game soundtracks on physical media. It's a good time for that.
Yeah.
I am curious with Power Chord and with Big Blue Bubble games, you know, you have like your 3 major games that we've talked about. Obviously, Power Chord's not out yet, but I have to imagine that people talking ideas, people are thinking about things. Obviously, if you can't talk about it specifically, what, for sure. But I'm just curious if you guys are already thinking about, well, we're getting close to release. What other kind of cool things do we want to do? Do we have anything else in the works? Because you jump genres. Like every major release you have has been a different genre. So I imagine the next game is going to be something completely different. Is those kind of conversations in the works yet?
Yeah, so obviously, My Singing Monsters is the ship that won't stop, and it's going to be its 10th anniversary in September. So we have a team on that. We have a team on Power Chord, and then we have a team working on something else, which I can't say anything about. But
Sure.
then we are also in the early stages of figuring out what our next project is going to be. And the cool thing about working at Big Blue Bubble is we're a very open studio in that the game pitch can come from anybody in the studio. It can come from if somebody in finance has, this awesome game idea and they put together kind of like a pitch doc or, even like just a high level, like here it is, somebody else go expand upon it. That's totally just how it works. And so we're just in that pitch stage where we're starting to collect different pitches from the team and stuff like that. So it is like a fun, cool time because, and new ideas are always, they're always a very fun time, I think, within the studio. But want to make sure that we give the complete focus to Power Chord and
of course.
And it's one of those things where it's like, we definitely, in an ideal world, Power Chord would take off and people would dig it. And it's one of those things where I think there's even some ideas that we have for our pie in the sky, things that we'd love to one day also add to the game. And
sure.
And it's one of those things, if the game resonates with players, we're definitely on board with continuing to support the game even outside of some of the initial support plans we have.
I have to ask only because I know it is no secret to any listener of our podcast that Geoff and I are Nintendo fanboys, and Michael, you've expressed the same. This does feel like the perfect experience for Nintendo Switch as well as other consoles. Obviously, you have nothing announced now, but I have to imagine that's a conversation that is ongoing. I'm sure you, as a person who plays games, would love to have Power Chord on the Switch. And so I'm just curious if those conversations are something that the studio is at least considering for a future release.
I think Power Chord would feel great on the Nintendo Switch. I feel like it would feel great on multiple places, including mobile, right?
I mean, yeah.
It's a drag and drop kind of game. And we make lots of mobile games as well. But I will say, when we designed the game from very early on, we designed with controllers in mind, and you can see that in that you can play the demo on Steam with a controller, and it totally works. So yeah, I will say it has definitely been on our mind throughout development, and if we have any, exciting news on that front, we'll be sure to share it and sing it from the rooftops.
Of course.
I appreciate that. I think at the end of the day, everyone who makes a game, no one makes a game going, I only want it to be in this one place.
Some people do.
Well, unless you're Sony. Sometimes, Sony sometimes does that. But for the most part, I feel like with indie developers and indie games, for sure, it's like, do we want our game to be everywhere? Of course we do.
Yeah.
But it's obviously budget and everything else. And, not every platform is the same, and porting and all of that. But it's just, I can't help but notice the similarities. Like all of the games that we've quoted in this episode that this game reminds us of are all on Switch. And also the Switch is just my dream system. I love, I bought an OLED because I never play it docked. I always am sitting on the couch, laying down, holding it in my hands. It's been the best way to play KOTOR, on that screen. It looks gorgeous on that screen. So that's just me. I'm always pitching everyone.
I feel you for sure. It's been a good indie machine for sure.
Yeah.
I think if I missed something on Steam initially, it was typically I was picking it up on Switch because then you can play it wherever, right? It's the beautiful nature. And now that may slightly be changing soon if I ever get a Steam
A Steam
Deck,
Deck.
Yeah.
but I feel like I got a few months to wait for that still. So
You and me both.
yeah.
I have one of those, and I haven't used it as much as I would like. It's mostly been a glorified Mass Effect Legendary Edition machine, though I have been playing Persona 4 on it as well.
Nice.
Though I am curious to check, do you guys know if Power Chord runs on the Steam Deck? Because I haven't tried it.
I believe, don't quote me on this,
Sure.
I believe it does. I think, if I'm remembering correctly, a player within the community, they checked it out and they were like telling us that it worked. And then somebody, I think the first time they got one in the office, they checked it out and they said it was working. So I believe it does. Cool. I don't see why it wouldn't, in that our previous games on Steam all worked on the Steam Deck without us having to do literally anything. Steam built a pretty like marvelous wrapper there to make things work on Linux without any additional support. And so we're building this game in Unity, same as we built the last ones, and so I imagine it's going to be pretty similar in terms of the carryover to the Steam Deck.
I mean, it works great with the controller. I play everything with the
Same here.
controller, and I played the Power Chord demo with a controller, and I you know, I mean, the mouse drag and drop seems obvious for those games, but there's something about the tactility of a controller. Maybe I just made up a word. We don't know.
I think that's right.
Of a controller.
All words are made up.
That's true. All words are made up. But same with Slay the Spire and Darkest Dungeons. There's something about the manipulation with a controller in a deck game that I really like. And Power Chord is no exception. I think it plays really great with a controller. The tutorialization of it works really well with the Xbox controller layout, which is obviously currently what it's designed for. And so I really dig it. I'm so excited for this game, Michael. I can't tell you enough. I know I said this about Forgone, which I also loved, but this, because I'm a music nerd and I've recently discovered deck builders.
It's your perfect game. It's the perfect combination.
Step into my world, Matt.
Yeah.
Join me.
We had the absolute pleasure of catching up at PAX East, and once I sat down, I know you commented on the joy I was experiencing just playing the game, because I just between the music and everything else, it's an experience. I'm curious, it must be a joy. Obviously demoing it and putting it on Steam Next Fest and seeing people stream it and stuff is great, but I'm sure nothing compares to that con experience where you're face to face with the fans as they're playing the game.
No, it's nice. It was nice to be back at PAX East, and I went to GDC as well, and I really like the rules that they put in place, and I like that they're also sticking with that for PAX West. Obviously nothing is perfect or anything like that, but I'd much rather people be more cautious with those rules and procedures. Because it was so good being back at PAX and seeing everyone and just getting that feedback right in the moment. The amount of things that you're able to, we drove there from London, so that was a 8-10 hour drive, which I love a good road trip, so I was happy to do. But it was nice because then on the way home, we got to basically swap notes of what were people saying to you, and what are some things that we can bring to the team specifically from here. And it's just I think unmatched in getting that feedback is being able to actually talk to somebody.
Yeah. Were you able to bring Power Chord to any conventions before PAX East, or was that kind of the first one?
No, that was the first in-person convention that. Well, technically, actually, we were at GDC for an event there. The Mix. They had a one-night kind of thing where a bunch of different media and creators are invited to play games, and I think we were one of 12 games that was there. Bit of a different experience because much smaller crowd as opposed to PAX, but it's nice getting back, and I'm looking forward to doing some more.
Yeah, especially since this game has been in development since 2020, and not till April of 2022 was it able, and had nothing to do with the development process of the game. Was the first time it got into people's hands like that. I can only imagine how refreshing it feels.
For sure. It feels great.
Michael, we're so lucky to have you here. Thank you for taking the time to chat with us. So obviously, Power Chord is now currently listed on Steam. You can wishlist it now, which everyone should go
do it.
Please wishlist this game. Even if you want to buy it on a future platform that they may or may not.
It helps.
It still helps. Still helps. So do that. But please tell folks where they can find you online, where they can find Power Chord and Big Blue Bubble online, do all the spieling and
all that stuff.
The thing that you're here to do.
Yeah, so for sure you can follow Power Chord at Power Chord Game on Twitter. And then you can also, if you like TikTok, we have Big Blue Bubble Games, which is where we do a lot of the Power Chord stuff. And then we have a Discord, which you can join, and there's links all over on our stuff. And then if you're interested in following little old me, you can follow me on Twitter or pretty much anywhere at MPM Hammond. M as in Michael, P as in Paul, M as in Mackenzie, and then Hammond, because that's my full name, which my parents thought it sounded like a prime minister. And that's why I was named it.
Kind of does.
So I don't think I'm going to be a prime minister at this point, but
Not unless there's a prime minister position within a game company, which frankly, we all got to get on
you
that.
know what? Exactly,
Right.
exactly.
Just change your title one day to Prime Minister or Michael Hammond.
Yeah, I love it.
Everyone will be like, "Why, Mike? Why did you change?
Be
him?"
the ruling class,
Exactly.
dude.
I was born to have that title with this name, so that's why I did it.
Well, again, thank you for joining us, Michael. It's great to see you again. I'm so excited for Power Chord. I hope everybody goes and wishlists it. It's a fun time. Play the demo now while it's out. It's definitely something that I can see losing a lot of hours to eventually when it's released.
Yeah, I look forward to losing a lot of time to it. Like, I'm so excited for that. And listeners, have you played Power Chord yet? Are you checking it out? What brought you into the game if you played it before listening to this episode? Was it the music? Was it the gameplay? Was it anything about the design? Did you get to play it at PAX East? We want to hear from you about all of those. What are you excited about for when the game comes out? Because I also want to talk granular things about music and deck builder games. Please talk about it with me. You can reach out to us on Twitter, Instagram, over email, funandgamespod across all of those. You can go to certainpov.com and check out not only this show, our other show, Side Quests, other fantastic nerdy podcasts on the Certain POV network. You can find a permanent invite link to our Discord server where we talk about all kinds of things and share all kinds of gifts. And in whatever way, we want to hear from you about this game and what other games you're excited about.
Yes, please. You can also rate and review us on your podcast platform of choice. It helps get us in front of more listeners. We'd really appreciate a 5-star rating on Apple Podcasts or on Spotify. And as Geoff said, please reach out to us. We absolutely would be happy if we had the missives to do a mailbag episode. We will handily do that. We've done guest or fan-suggested topics. Please engage with us because we love discussing games. We love bringing indie games like this to the masses. And, we just appreciate having you here listening to us ramble on endlessly about how we didn't get a 20-year-old game spoiled for us and still got to experience that naturally.
Because whether it's an old game, a new game, you're breaking the game, you're playing it exactly as it's supposed to be, all by your lonesome or with thousands of people watching you on Twitch, whatever it is, you're making your own fun. And yeah, I think everyone here is in agreement that's what this is all about. And we want to hear about how you go about that because this is a conversation. Thank you for being a part of it. I'm Geoff Moonen.
And I'm Matt A.K. Stormageddon.
And happy gaming.
Nostalgia is one of the strongest forces in the human psyche and is responsible for the continued existence of some of our favorite fandoms. From the minds behind the Dole Up in Dreams podcast and Isolation Cast Voices from Quarantine, Saturday Morning Confidential takes you on a deep dive into the properties that helped influence the artists and creators of today. So whether you are a Goonie, a Gem Girl, a Digi-Destined, or you just want to return to Oz, new episodes release on Fridays bi-weekly starting January 1st of 2021, and join us on the Wednesdays after the main show for the Serial Killer Radio Hour, where we sit down with the people responsible for the toys, shows, and fandoms that you love. Now you can find Saturday Morning Confidential at certainpov.com/SMCpod or on your favorite podcast platforms. So don't forget to tune in for another deep dive into the files of Saturday Morning Confidential.
CPOV. CertainPOV.com.